Welcome. You have found the show we call Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? This is a podcast for men. And on this show, we will hear real life stories from men about how they have navigated the complexities of being a man in this modern day. We are going to look at the boys don't cry way of thinking and how that has influenced them and how they have risen above societal pressures to be true to themselves. The focus of this show is men's real-world experiences, not just ideas and theories. I hope that you will learn from what they have discovered and use it in your life as well. Let's get into today's show. Hello, everyone. This is Brandon Archer. Welcome to another episode of Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? Today, I have Kevin with me. Mcnee? Is it Mcnee?
It's
Yeah.
Mcnee.
Mcnee. Okay. I read it get it before we got on here, and then I'm like, oh my God, I just gapped out because I had another Kevin a couple weeks ago. Welcome, man. When I put out the call for, who I should interview, you put your hand up and I'm like, abso-freaking-lutely, because we've connected before and you're a fellow Canadian, which is super cool. And yeah, welcome. Thanks for putting your hand up.
Thanks, brother. It's any opportunity to have like a real in-depth, open, vulnerable conversation where who the fuck knows where it's going to go is something that I'll always put my hand up for. And I feel like that's what's helped me the most on my kind of like healing journey. And I think that's where, it's helped me the most. And the more that I can do that, the more opportunities I'll take.
Totally. And that's what I've wanted this to be all about, is like unscripted. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to be as real as we can be, because I think men need to hear like real freaking conversations. So why don't you take a minute and just tell everybody who you are, what you do, why you do it, a little bit of your journey if you feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Kevin Mcnee. I am a life transition coach, and I've been struggling with what to call myself, because the coach part is, I'm like, oh, am I a coach or am I a mentor or am I a guide, whatever it is. But ultimately it doesn't matter. What I support men through is transitions. And that's, transition in a career, transition in relationship, transition from who they are, where they are, to who they want to be and where they want to go. And that's literally the easiest and the most ultimate way to say that. I've been through so many transitions over the last few years of my life, especially, but over the course of my life, transitioning and transforming in so many ways, from being overweight and closet smoking to losing 50 pounds and completely transforming my body physically, and then mentally, emotionally, and spiritually going through the journey that comes along with that, and hitting my 40s and going, what is my life all about here, living it for, in all of these ways that I thought, not to jump around too much, but I did so much of what I thought that I should do, what I, what society, what my parents, what everyone, what was available to me, that I thought that, hey, this looks pretty good. There's lots of people doing this. They look happy. I'm going to give it a try. Well, I achieved everything that I thought that I wanted in that space, and realized that wasn't it. So, that's, it's been a journey. I continue to face myself, and that's where I'm finding the answers. The more that I dig, the more that there is, and the more that I heal that, the better I feel. So it's kind of the journey that I'm on. So
Yeah.
a little bit vague, but yeah. Thanks for asking.
No, yeah, it's broad strokes. Kids?
I have 2 kids. I have a 15-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. So navigating the teenage years, which I can remember when they were young, going, oh man, I wish they were like a little bit more self-sufficient. This is like, having to feed them or whatever. And then all of a sudden getting to this point, and I'm like, oh man, it was sure a lot of fun when they enjoyed my company and liked having me around.
Oh, dude, I remember I had to like grieve the loss of their childhood and realize, oh, damn, they're like teenagers. That phase of life is gone. It was a
Yeah.
real challenge as a dad.
Yeah.
You had a lot in your share, and I think what you do helping men and what do I call myself? I want to it's funny. That really spoke to me because how old are you now?
I'm 44.
44. So midlife, all the questions come up. I get it. Been there. I'm a little older
Totally.
than you, but not much. And I too, like, I don't like using the word coach. I think it's like clinical. It's not as clinical as counselor, but
Yeah.
I got a question for you. Do you feel like eldership in our society is gone and that's the role maybe we're trying to define?
That's exactly, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I've thought about this. I've felt into it. I've even spent time in a sweat lodge with an elder who's a friend of
Mm,
mine, and that's I see so much of growing up where the elders in our society, and I'll speak from myself. We talked about this too, and I want to speak from my experience is working up until we're not contributing anymore, and then all of a sudden it's then what, right? Working to retirement, that's the dream, and now you're not part of society, so you get put out to pasture. Where elderhood, you look at cultures past, is the elders are cherished,
mhm.
right? They're the ones that are like celebrated because of the wisdom that they have, right? And that's where it's like, where are our elders around to teach us what they know, whether it's right or wrong for us, but where are they? They're retired or living the retired life,
Yeah,
and that was a so-called dream that we're all supposed to be chasing. It's like, is it?
yeah. I remember growing up, I looked to my grandfather for his wisdom.
Mm,
It was very interesting. I felt I was really close with him, and this is way before I understood eldership and why we need it in society. And I would just like, okay, this man is wise. I know he has something to teach me. And I think for me, I missed it. Once he passed away, I'm like, I felt a little lost, to be honest. My dad was, he did what he could for me, but I wanted more. I definitely
mm,
wanted more. And I think,
of course.
you know, as guys in their 40s, coaches, mentors, whatever we're trying to define, I think we're actually trying to be elders. I think that's actually what
Yeah.
we're trying to do.
Yeah, I've heard it, in podcasts or, other coaches, mentors, saying how lacking mentorship is for men.
Mm,
And it's not because our dads weren't doing the best that they could, no matter what. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I have an amazing dad. My mom and dad are still married. They've provided for me in ways that I am super grateful for. But again, like you said, there was a lot that I didn't get from him. He was away
Yeah.
working a lot, right? And as a kid, I took that on my own way. Whatever it was, right? It wasn't that he didn't love me or he wasn't providing for me, but him not being there, that allowed me to create these stories in my mind. Oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I need to
Ooh.
do more to have my dad around. But not having that guide, someone there to be open and communicate and share the stories, the experiences, his challenges, his fears, his dreams. Anyone ever ask you what your dreams were when you were a kid? Or as a teenager, or as like in your 20s and 30s
Yeah.
as men? That's not asked, because this is kind of the route that you're supposed to take, and that's what our dads did and our grandfathers did. But they weren't taught to pass down the wisdom and the knowledge. And for me, wisdom is all encompassing. That's emotions, That's physical, that's spiritual, that's mental, that's everything, right? I'm sad. This is why I'm sad. I'm
Yeah.
struggling. This is why I'm struggling. I'm fucking mad and I'm angry and this is why, and I can deal with it in a, in a healthy way instead of just like letting it build up and then taking a fucking sledgehammer to the lawnmower, which I did witness
Yeah.
as a kid, right?
Oh my God. I want to pull that thread, but like we talked before, I want this podcast to be about our experiences, and maybe there's a
Mhm.
follow-up one we do, but that's a great segue into one of the questions that I have is, what were you taught about men and emotions when you were young?
Um, the first thing that comes to me was um, losing sucks.
Hmm.
And if you tie, it's like kissing your sister. So
I've
that was
never
one.
heard that before.
That was a lesson that I got from my dad was, when I started playing sports, he was a sports guy and loved the fact that I played sports. And I was naturally pretty, I wasn't the best, but I was naturally just pretty good at the things that I tried. And one of the things was he said, losing sucks and a tie is like kissing your sister. And I knew what his temper was like when, behind the scenes at home. um so I knew that, and I saw that when I played sports, if I didn't win, I knew that how much that meant to my dad. So it became my mission. And when I didn't, or if things weren't going my way, i was a I was a savage, right?
Mm.
I was, and I'm a recovering nice guy. I call myself a recovering nice guy and people pleaser. But I was the prototype, like the prototype of the nice guy, where I loved to be loved, needed that love and validation from everyone, wanted to be liked, did everything that I could to get that. And everybody did. Everyone thought, what they always said, "Oh, you're such a nice kid. You never complain. You're so easygoing," and all of this stuff. But when I got onto the hockey ice or onto the baseball field or onto the golf course, if anything didn't go my way, it was look the fuck out, right? Other kids paid the price, other adults paid the price when I played like rec hockey, and it came all the way into my adulthood, seeking that validation and trying to find it from, outside sources, which essentially I learned it to be my dad all of these years.
That's wild.
Mhm.
Did your dad shame you when you were a kid if you didn't win?
Yeah, it's interesting because, looking back, um, it was, it was shame.
Mm.
And I've even wrote him letters, even though he's alive and around. I wrote letters and read them to him over the years to going through my own healing journey. And I know that he was just doing the best that he could, but the way that he would shame me is through being passive aggressive, like that jokester. I'd hit a ball into the bush at the golf course, and he'd be like, "Oh, you sure didn't want that one. Oh, I bet you sure pissed off at that shot, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I fucking am pissed off. But you being Captain Obvious about it is actually making it even more so, right?" So, it was little things like that, right? Or and I can remember being overweight as a kid too. He'd flick my love handles,
Mm.
right? And or like pinch them and call me chubby chicken and think that it was funny. And I would laugh and whatever, but I just remember that being such something that I was like, I was already so ashamed of how I looked in the mirror because that was kind of, you know, how I was raised. But when it was brought on by someone who's supposed to accept me and love me for who I am no matter what, to hear that from him when I already got teased about it at school or with other kids, or you know myself looking in the mirror, um yeah, I didn't even really realize how much it affected me until I look back on it through the years.
Yeah, that's powerful share, man. because as you probably know, like when we're young, well, even into our 20s, really, like we look to our parents as gods. Like
Yeah.
fundamentally, that's what they are to us. We're looking to them for everything, for any kind of guidance. So when they shame us for just being, just literally existing, that leaves some scars, and that leaves some stuff for us to deal with. Did you, in those letters you wrote to him, did you address that kind of stuff?
All of it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And you actually
And
read it to him?
yeah, I did. Yeah, it's like it was the single most powerful healing experience that I've ever went through. And I mean, I've done breath work, I've done ayahuasca, I've done all sorts of spiritual stuff. I went through the sweat lodge, and that was the single most healing experience and transforming experience that I've been through. Um the first letter that I ever wrote, I knew that if I read it to him, it would kill him. And I'm not sure if my dad will ever listen to this podcast, but we've had these discussions now recently, and again, facing these challenges, and trying to like build our relationship on a solid foundation. Um, yeah, the very first letter that I wrote, and I went through it, and not edited it, but I just rewrote it 5 or 6 different times. But the first time that I wrote it, I couldn't I couldn't believe the vile stuff that I had inside of me that I wanted to say to him.
Hmm.
And again, like my dad's an amazing man. Everyone that's ever worked for him, that knows him, says that. And that's what I've always heard my whole life. But I was like, I know a different side too. Right. So that was also part of my struggle growing up. But when I was writing that letter the first time, and the power of journaling, and it's one of the things that I say is the most powerful tool if you were to choose one, like start journaling, right? um the stuff that came up, I'm like, oh my god, I got the chills thinking about it. Is like, I forgot about that.
Mhm.
Like, I can't believe like I forgot about that. Like, it was, I remember like going back and feeling that into that exact experience, going, fuck, I didn't even realize how much that affected me, because I got so used to just like, oh, that one hurt, wall. Oh, that one hurt, coat of armor, right? And yeah, once I started to, take those layers off, and the the coats of armor, and started to recognize where I was still hanging on to all of that stuff.
So how did your dad react to the letters? You said multiple, so like, man, you just opened a can of worms. I've done exercises where you don't bring this to your parent, but I've never
Mhm.
actually talked to anybody I might have to do
Yeah.
this after.
I never planned to. I never planned to. I was like, no way that he could ever deal with this, or what I want to like. Yeah, like, I mean, he's my dad,
Mhm.
right? And I'm like, do I want to open this can of worms, and do I want to risk like losing him altogether, or like hurting him to the point where I don't know what's going to happen, right? But in turn, I was like, am I just hurting myself by not doing that?
Yeah.
Right? And there is such power. Like, the when I wrote it, I read it out loud. I read it to my partner, and then I threw it in the fire, and I burnt it, and just made it that ceremony. And this is something I know that you're very ceremonial and ritualistic as well, and there's such power in like that visual and physical letting go. And I was like, oh, I'm good, right? And again, there was just the stuff that I felt like the next layer deeper was maybe writing another letter, and writing another letter. And finally, it got down to where I'd rewritten it 5 or 6 times. And each time got a little bit better. And I was doing an Akashic Records reading with my partner, and she was doing a reading for me. And she said, the next thing that's holding you back is healing, finally healing with your dad. And I'm like, I got to read him the letter. And that was the first thing I needed to read him that letter. And right then I sent him a text message and said, I have something that I want to talk to you about. It's a letter that I wrote, and it's going to be pretty heavy. So when you got some time, let's make time to connect. And he responded and said, I'm not busy right now. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Not what you were expecting.
Yeah. Oh man, give me at least like a day or two. Right. But it was kind of like that, ripping off the Band-Aid, so to speak. And yeah, I read him the letter, and I said, these are my experiences. And I went through it and picked off a bunch of the ones that were the most impactful for me. And I just let him know why they were, and what they were, and what I felt, and how it impacted me throughout my life. And then at the end, I said, I would never, ever pick another father.
Mm-hmm.
You were the best father that I could ever have dreamed of. And I forgive you, and I love you. And I'm no longer taking this with me. This is complete for me. This is like full circle healing. So you can respond, you can react, you can reply, whatever, however, but I'm now free, and I'm letting this go. Right. And his reaction, I think that was the original question, was his reaction. Right. His reaction was, well, fuck, I did the best that I could.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which absolutely 100%. And he's, he wasn't sure how to respond, or he took some time to think about it. And it's actually quite a story from here. I felt that I needed to do it right then, like right away. And within 2 weeks, and you can relate to this as well, because I know that you survived a heart attack. My dad ended up having heart conditions and heart issues, and he was in Arizona, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you're not leaving this hospital. So he ended up having quadruple bypass surgery. Wow. Literally within 2 weeks from that point. And I'm like, oh fuck, I killed him. Right. But more so when I actually thought about it and felt into it, I'm like, imagine if I was hanging on to that still, and I lost them, and I didn't get to, say what I needed to say, and have him know who I am and why I am. Because what I'm doing, being a men's coach, a leader, building a business by helping men open up, be vulnerable, sharing and healing their wounds. That's a job that, our fathers, or, people in industry, which is where I come from, a lot of them don't understand that. How can that be a business, or how can that be a job? So, when in going through these conversations and healing this, it's like, now he can see why I am the way that I am, and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it was a pretty powerful experience. But through that, he responded with a text, and it had to have been about 2 feet long if I was measuring it. And he came back, and he's like, I wanted to respond in a way that wasn't reactive, and it wasn't out of anger, or wasn't out of defense. And he came back with, a lot of times he was, didn't remember. And other times he's like, this is what I was going through. This is what I was struggling with. They put my brother up for adoption, my mom and dad, and then stayed together and had my sister and I, and they were forced to do that. So when he thought about, one of the situations was where all he could think of was what my mom looked like when she had to give up my brother for adoption. And he felt that he was losing me, and it scared the shit out of him so bad that he just reacted out of anger. But essentially it was fear. Right. And I'm like, man, it just explains so much. And I just had this empathy and compassion for him, instead of going being that victim of, me, oh, this is how I'm feeling and this is how I'm hurting, which is all valid. But it just came from a more empowered place where I'm like, oh, I can now walk in his shoes a little bit too. And I feel like that's where so many of us lose track and not seeing the other side of the fence.
Yeah, because they're humans. So we, as kids, we're like, we put them on a pedestal. They are God, like in by almost by definition, they are. And I really
Mhm.
invite people to like look at this. Like when you're a kid, you are looking to your parent for everything, and they're held to a standard in our minds. When we're adults, it's not realistic. And then as you unwind this stuff, there you realize, oh my God, they're just a human being. And my hurt is they didn't mean to hurt us. like that took me years and years to like, oh damn, this is just the way life works.
Yeah.
We can't
Yeah.
have
Oh,
perfect parents. It's impossible. But where we're
totally.
missing in society is that eldership to teach us, hey, guess what? Like your emotions are yours. Your hurt is yours. Yes, somebody's behavior, our parents or our gods, might have made us feel that way, but it's not up to them to fix it.
Hmm.
We together with them, we can repair a connection, which is, man, I'm so curious about the connection you and your dad have now. But what you just shared is like, that is some next level humanship, in my opinion, because not a lot of us go to that level of dealing with things that happen in our childhood. It's, dude, you're blowing my mind actually, because I've done work around that, but I've never actually done that with my parents. I've done it through poetry, um, but never, brought it to them. So I have to really think about maybe it's time to do that.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, it was pretty it's a super powerful, yeah, next level for sure.
what is your connection with him like today?
So going through like the experience up until that point, they kind of knew that I was on a journey, right? And maybe didn't understand it, or like kind of like this woo woo. But through that, we have started to connect more, right? And there was times of reaction where my dad would be like, I just I don't understand where you're at. And maybe I never will, but I lost my dad when I was young, and he never taught me a whole bunch of stuff, and my brothers were older and all of this stuff, right? And I was just like quiet for a second going, thanks for sharing that. I didn't I didn't know that. You've never shared that
Mhm.
with me. And he was just like, I could see him just like, whoa, okay. Um, you know, he reached out. So long story short, our relationship is starting to grow together on a deeper and different level, right? My my family, myself included, for most of my life, dealt with everything on the surface. As long as the image was
Mhm.
portrayed okay, um, then we were good, right? Talk about the weather, talk about sports, talk about work. That was how we dealt with things until there was a blow up. And if it made somebody uncomfortable, then there was anger. And the way that my dad would deal with it is he would just get angry and loud until the point when everyone else just shut down. And that was my thing. My response was the freeze. I learned that from my mom. And it was just like, okay, I'm afraid of conflict. I'm just gonna let it go, and it'll settle down and deal with it. But through this process and confronting him and knowing that he doesn't have that power over me anymore has shifted our dynamic to where it's almost like I'm the father, I'm the parent, and he's the child. And he's like, messaging me, being like, hey, I ran in a 5K today. I went and did this. Or um, I was watching the news the other day, and a ship got stuck in the Panama Canal. And I know that you believe in like that full moon energy and the power around it. Well, the full moon raised the ocean enough and it plucked that ship out of the Panama Canal. And he's like, and I thought about you. And I'm like, no shit. Well, I said, I appreciate you thinking about me. I love you. Right. And that's how it shifted. But, we've had some challenges come up along the way where, where triggers come up and old wounds happen. Old wounds get opened up and, there's a reaction. And I'll say, I told you that I wasn't going to accept that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is the last time, then it's the last time. But I said, I'm not going to be talked to like that. I'm not going to allow you to speak like that. And I'm okay with if you're going to do that, but I'm okay with this is the boundary and cutting it off. And that's what that letter and that conversation that allowed, because I've come to peace with everything. Right.
Man, that is incredibly powerful. And that reparenting component, I've recently had something come up in my men's group where I had to really sit with what the man was saying and realize, oh, damn it, I represent his father to him right now. And what I've learned from that, and you're helping me kind of suss this out more with your share, is this is not linear. Like we think eldership and father type stuff has to come generational down. But as you are leading your own healing, you can help your dad heal too. It's wild. And this is subconscious. Like I know you and I have the language to understand this, but the reality is for any man, when you own your experience and your feelings and your hurt and your pain, you are not just healing you. Like that's not the way this works.
Mm-hmm.
You are literally helping your dad heal, and that is blowing my mind right now. Because I've had other men in my life say their relationships with their dad, they're opening up, and it's because they didn't get that mentorship or eldership or teaching from their dad. They still crave it. They still need
Mm-hmm.
it. How freaking cool is that you can do that for your dad? I think that's mind blowing.
Yeah, man, it's pretty incredible. And we had an experience here just recently where I had to set a boundary with my son. Right. My son lived with me full time since my separation 5 years ago and divorce. My son lived with me the majority of the time for the last 3 years, so 12, 13, 14, 15 years. And we'd been dealing with a lot of the same things and recognizing where, respect was starting to go down. Listening was starting to go down. We were dealing with some of the same issues that we'd been dealing with 3 years ago. And our conversations and communication between my son and I are really good. And we have a really good, we can communicate and I'll listen to him. And that's where I believe that he feels safe to bring his anger, to bring his resentment, to bring all of that. But it got to the point where I was getting dumped on. I was getting all of that because he wasn't dealing with it with anyone else, with his mom, with his sister, with any of his struggles that he was dealing with. So I had to set a boundary and say, you know what, you don't get to treat me like shit and treat everyone else okay just because I'm going to sit here and listen to it. And, it came down to where it was like, if you're going to continue to act like this, then you're choosing not to be in this space. And you can spend the majority of the time with your mom, because that's where the biggest challenge is, because he felt like he couldn't talk to her. He was afraid to talk to her because she would just shut him down or blame him for stuff. And I totally get it. I mean, we were married, but it's, I'm like, but I said, and that's okay, but you don't get to take that out on me. And that's a boundary. Right. So I had to follow through on my boundary. And that was my biggest fear as a father, going, you're going to go back to stay with your mom because you know what my boundaries are. And we created them together. but this is what's going to happen. And if you want to live with me, I said, the door is always open. But I said, there are rules to be followed, and that's no different with anything in life. And again, that is my biggest fear, was like, I've always wanted to be chosen by my dad, by my partners, by my kids. And I finally was. And here I am, you know, giving him back, or, feeling like a failure. I'm a failure as a father, failure as a parent. And then the reaction of my dad when that happened was a blowout, to where he was like, didn't want to talk to me again because I was abandoning my son. And I was like, so to deal with this situation of me so supposedly abandoning my son, as you say, you're going to abandon your son? And and that's where I again, following through on what I said, you don't get to react like this. And I told you that the last time. And that was it. So for about 3 or 4 days, I didn't know if I was ever going to talk to my dad again, because he told me, you know, if I hear from you again, it'll be too fucking soon. And I was like, okay, if that's how you feel. I said, I've been pretty clear on where I'm at right from the get-go. And I said, I don't know if I'm making the right decision. I may be making the worst mistake that I've ever made. But I said, going on dealing with stuff the way that it's going is not helping anything. So I'm willing to try something different and see what happens. Right. I'll admit my mistakes, and I'll learn from them as I go, just like I've been doing. But I said, just continuing on thinking and hoping that things are going to get better, it isn't fucking working. And it never worked for me in my childhood. It never worked for me through adolescence. It never worked in my marriage. And I refuse to do that any further. So, yeah.
Wow. My son is 18 now, so what a ride it is, hey?
Yeah,
As these
no
young,
kidding.
these boys try to transition into being a man, what the hell does that even look like, right? And it's tricky.
Yeah,
And not only from
yeah.
our standpoint as fathers, but, you know, depending on the mother's understanding of that role that a father has in a teenage boy's path. Like, we don't know. We're so disconnected from what that's supposed to look like. And I'm sure you have too, like if you look into what our role is, it's pretty important. It's pretty important. And when I hear you sharing, it's like that's great. He feels like he can come to you. It's just our role is to teach them this is how a man deals with his emotions. And there's personal boundaries. Like, we all feel that way, but
Hmm.
how do we teach them you can have those big feelings, but your behavior can't be driven by it? That's
Totally.
how in the hell do you explain that to somebody? I still don't. I mean, I've experienced my change in allowing my emotions to rule my behavior. And now my behavior is more of a choice. As a teenage boy is developing, his brain can't keep up. Like,
Hmm.
it's not till age 26 that their brain is completely developed. He's 13.
Absolutely.
He's halfway there. It's a challenge, dude. So,
Yeah.
man, I feel for you in that one. That's a tricky one.
Yeah. And it's something too, going through that. I'm like, what am I teaching him by allowing him to continue to disrespect myself, my partner, our home, and me just allow it? What am I teaching him going forward when somebody starts treating him that way and walking all over him
I
with no
fully agree
backbone,
with
no
you.
boundaries? And I'm like, you know what? As hard as this is, as much as I'm going to be judged, I'm going to have the opinions of others. I'm, not supporting my child, or, fostering that, whatever that looks like, the words or the thoughts and opinions and feelings of others. I'm like, this is what I need to do, because I feel like down the road, he's going to see my dad never let me walk on him. but he also didn't let anyone else do that either. And
Mm.
I'm like, I've told him, and these are the conversations we have. I said, I was like that for the first 39 years of my life. I said, I made a vow that I will never be like that again. And I will continue to walk the talk and face what I need to face to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And that means for you as my son, it means towards your mother, to my parents, to everyone in my life. I will stand up for myself and let them know where I stand. And I'll be open and clear on that, because those are my boundaries and that's how I'm going to live. And if you can take even a fraction of that, you're going to be a fuck of a lot better off than I am, and catch on to it a lot sooner. So it may not feel good right now, and it doesn't, but
But
this
that's the
is
thing
this.
is none of this stuff feels good. It's
No.
uncomfortable. And when we've in the past in our lives like taken the route that we avoid the discomfort, we're out of alignment with who we are and our sovereignty and respecting ourselves. And it's just hard as a dad of a teenager, because I get it. It's like, oh, if I cut them off or if I set a boundary, they might feel rejected. But cognitively, no, this is good for them as a human being.
Mhm.
I had an experience a while ago. um, I read this Dan Baker book, just so good. I've reread it twice. I'm gonna reread it again. And one of the things he had in there was, what do you appreciate in your life? And I think he suggested 3 things, and I picked 3 things. And I can't remember what they are. But I asked my son one day, I think we were having pizza down by the boardwalk. And I said, hey, I learned this thing. And I was really curious, like, what are 3 things you appreciate? Trying to actually like pass on some knowledge. And he's
Of
like, I
course.
really appreciate that you're constantly trying to help me be a better person. And I'm like, what? So, I just share that because there's a part of your son probably too, the same goddamn thing. He's like, this hurts. I don't fully understand it, but I think dad's got my back on this one. And that's where our fathers were doing things that they thought were best for us, like maybe the passive aggressive shaming. That was their version of what we're talking about now. Like,
Totally.
I gotta bump you this way in life. But now, like, we're kind of in such a cool time in the world, and dangerous, where we have access to so much information. Life is technically easier than ever, like with food and shelter. The basics are pretty much covered. And now we get to evolve on this level, emotional
Hmm.
connections with people. And our bumping our kids on the better path of life, it just looks different now. If you choose to gain
Absolutely.
that knowledge, if you choose to like deal with your own shit, see what happened, go, oh god damn it, this happened, that happened, okay, not my dad's fault, not my mom's fault. And now we're doing our best. It just looks different.
100%. One of the things that keeps coming up is that leadership by example. And the thing that I had to keep coming back to is, I'm not asking my kids to do anything that I'm not doing,
Mm,
right? Whereas I feel like for many of us, and I'll just speaking for myself, is I was being asked to do things that my parents weren't doing, right? Doing, but what I'm talking about is taking care of ourselves, right?
yeah.
Taking care of your body, eating properly, reading, spending less time on your screens, being mindful, having meaningful conversations, emotional regulation, like all of that stuff. I'm practicing that and trying to pass that on to them by example. They see me doing it, right? And this is, for all of the men and the women who are listening to this podcast, what are you asking of your kids that you're not doing? Are you leading by example, right? If you want them to, to connect deeper and eat better and exercise and live the best, most fulfilling life possible, but you're literally going through the motions by just, committing yourself to work, being distracted, all of the activities, complete disconnection and distraction, you're actually not teaching them how to do that. And they're losing out and so are you, right? And I'm not saying that I've got it all figured out because I lived my life like that.
Mhm.
For 39 years of my life, I lived my life like that. And there's still times where I do, where I catch myself, being mindlessly distracted and going, oh, well, you know what? At least I caught myself this time and I can, reel myself back in. But yeah, it's just that's one of the things that I take so much pride in now in leading by example. And the mistakes that I made, apologizing
Yeah.
and rewriting them, right? If I can, coming back to my son and being like, hey, I'm really sorry I reacted in that way, but when you told a lie like that, I recognized when I was a kid, I used to lie like that too, and it really caused some problems for me.
Holy crap. What a share, man. Because, like, everything's a mirror. So when our kids, like, let's just use the lie thing, it brings up, I did that, or I have the capacity to do that too. And it can trigger us. And unless you have the awareness of, why am I getting so pissed off at my kid? It can really mess up the
Hmm.
connection, and they can feel that shame that
Yeah,
we're talking about. And I totally agree with you on the example thing. And one thing I've tried to do is empower them to feel comfortable to come to me when I make them feel hurt. Because
right.
yeah, maybe it is my behavior. Maybe I did do something out of line, but I view it also as, let me teach you how to deal with that hurt. And if it's about you need to set a boundary with me, cool, let's do that. I'm cool with that.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
in order for me to be in that place, I've had to deal with my shit. Otherwise, I
100%.
view it, kind of what your dad said to you, like, well, then I'm not talking to you. Well, that you're just perpetuating the cycle. We're here to like try
Yeah,
to break the cycle.
totally. And that's it. Like, like you spoke to it by reparenting, right?
Yeah,
It's reparenting ourselves through our kids. And then even like to look at my relationship with my father, I'm reparenting myself, and in turn he's getting me as a parent that he needed.
it's
It's like
wild,
the
man. It's
yeah,
so
it's like
wild.
it's grow the generational healing goes uphill and down.
Yeah,
And that was a reflection that a brother of mine that I was talking to, he's like, man, you're healing backwards and forwards. And I was like, I guess, yeah, I didn't even think about it that way. So yeah, it's something that just came up. So
well, this is how one man can heal the world. I will die on this hill of one man can heal the world because of the ripple effect. We don't,
mm,
unless you slow down and realize, the more I work on myself, you're affecting your dad. But you're not only affecting your dad, his relationship with all the people in his life is slowly morphing too. Like, it's mind
that's right.
blowing if you actually look at how that works.
Mhm.
And I say that so passionately because I personally get irritated by organizations trying to change the world. I'm like, that's not how we're going to make change. We're going to like individually own our lives, reconnect with ourselves, reparent ourselves, and we just watch what would happen if we all, more of us did that. It'd be
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. I mean, I can promise the world on my Instagram feed, right? You can too. And that's all part of it. There's a confidence. I know what done for myself. I know what I've supported other men and women through, as you have as well. But essentially we're just showing them themselves. We're
100%.
showing them what's capable within them, because we're what they haven't had yet. And that's where like you said, eldership, mentorship, whatever word that you choose, it's they're getting what they needed. So it's like a support system where they can now open up and go, oh, this is what I'm feeling. This is where I've been struggling, this and this and this. Oh, now I see myself. This is who I've always wanted to be. This is who I've always meant to be. I didn't think that
Yeah.
I could ever be this person. And it happened literally because they just opened themselves up,
Well, you said something
right?
earlier about like when we were kids, did anybody ever ask us what our dreams were? I
Mhm.
remember a lot of my dreams, and I've actually fulfilled quite a few of them in my 40s, which just blew my mind. But you nailed it. It's like, who are you? Like, you get to be reintroduced to yourself.
Yeah,
Yourself is there. Your like authentic self, your sovereign self. There's lots of different terminology. They or he or she never went anywhere. It just got layered over with beliefs, with shame, with
totally.
all these things.
Yeah,
And the eldership, the mentorship, the coaching is a good one is just teaching you how to do that yourself. Get at it.
yeah.
And I say that because it's funny before we got on this recording, we're like, we're just gonna stay on stories. And you've shared a ton. But I also think there's a time and a place to share like the why this stuff's so important, how you do
Yeah.
it. Because my goal with these podcasts is like share with men. What can you see in your life that's similar to what Kevin just shared? Guarantee you, guarantee you guys are like, holy shit.
Mhm.
I went through something similar.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. Um, it's so challenging to keep these to an hour because there's so many good things, so many ways we could take it. What do you ever remember see your dad crying?
Yeah, I do. And when I think back, like, I'll, the first memory that comes to mind is when my aunt passed away.
Mm.
My aunt passed away at 39 years old of a massive heart failure, right? My cousin was sitting right beside her in the car. She went to put the keys in the ignition and literally slumped over the wheel, dead instantly. And my dad, I can remember my dad crying then. And it wasn't even till recently, like, through these conversations that, I mean, and I understood that he was sad because my aunt passed away. I never really knew her that well. I'd met her a few times, and he was sad, right? I'm like, oh, okay, crying means sad, but never talked about it. Later on in life, so just recently, when we were having a conversation, and I don't even know how we got into it, but he just, like, my grandma was 44 years old when my dad was born. He was the youngest of 7 kids, and he's like, my mom was never really around. Like, she never raised me. My sister did.
Mm.
She was 10 years older than me, and she just loved me, and I loved her. She raised me. I lived with them, when we got older through high school, and he went to high school in Kamloops, and he's like, my mom passed away like shortly after I was born. My grandmother, my dad's mom, passed away, and he's like, I lost my mom. Oh man, I can feel this. Whew. And then he goes, and then I lost my mom again. And I was like, holy fuck, like I never even thought about that. Right. Just that was the closest person that he had to his mom in his life. And he was like, and I literally could rewind all the way back to when I was 6 years old when that happened. And I'm like, now I could see him for who he was, for that. There's all the layers gone. There's all
Yeah.
of the, you know, there's the man, right? There's the little boy.
Yeah. There's the man, the human, not the God that we expect our parents to be. It's actually not a fair a fair thing to do to them. As adults, it's time to see them as who they are.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, I can remember him crying in like the weirdest times. Commercials,
Mm,
movies, where I'm like looking at him going like, I don't get it. Like, why are you crying? Right. But in learning is like there's so much that was like buried underneath, buried inside that I may never know. Right. Maybe he doesn't even know
yeah.
because it's never been addressed. Right. But all of a sudden it's like hits a nerve or strikes a nerve. And I mean, as a parent, that happens too, right? Like, seeing my kids as babies and then, hearing about a 2-year-old getting hurt or, thinking about, you know, a child getting cancer or something like that. And it just like literally like rips you apart. Still does, right? But yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it's definitely opens you up on all levels.
Yeah. So you saw your dad cry, commercial stuff. I think that's kind of cool personally, because a lot of guys never. What, when you cried as a teenager or a young boy, what was said to you? What feedback did you get?
You know what the strangest thing, and I love that this podcast is named, you know, why, do
Real
men
men.
cry?
Yeah.
Real do real men cry or do they, right? Is like I when I did cry growing up, like through, as I was growing up, it had to be something major. And when I did, I couldn't contain it. I couldn't speak. It just came out as like this explosion. And it happened in the times where, yeah, it was no different than my anger. It would bottle up, bottle up, bottle up, bottle up, and then come out in an explosion. And my tears and the way that I cried were the same way. I didn't cry when I was sad. I didn't cry when I was hurt.
Mm,
It I cried when it was absolutely I had nothing else left and it was just hit rock bottom. At least that's how it felt for me, right? And a lot of times it was because I felt like I was doing so much to try and be loved and accepted, and I wasn't.
hmm.
And I didn't know what else to do. So that's when the crying came.
And how was it received by your parents?
It felt like I was received for the first time, right? And seen because they're like, oh, this is sad. So he's actually hurting,
Hmm.
right? Because as a people pleaser and the nice guy like I was really good at covering it up, putting on a happy face or, distracting or deflecting. And when that happened, it was almost like they could see me for real for the first time in those times. And it's still that way.
Wow, man. It's powerful. Okay. We could go on and on, but I wanna start moving towards concluding this. I've got a question I like asking everybody near the end, and that is, what message do you have for a previous version of yourself?
You're good enough and you're worthy of everything that you desire. You don't have to justify who you are, what you want, and what you do. That's something that I wish that I would have heard, for the longest time. And I see you and I'm here for you. I got your back no matter what, and I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna help you reach your dreams and fulfill it, whatever that looks like.
Awesome. Kevin, where can people find you?
I'm pretty active on Instagram, Facebook, a little bit on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's kind of one that maybe needs the most authenticity. So
Mm,
I'm kind of like learning to lean in there. But Instagram at Kevin_Heart Warrior, Kevin Mcnee Warrior of the Heart on Facebook, and yeah, I've got Warrior Within Collective, which is a private membership for men. where we get in there and do the work. And it's, we've got some structure. We're having real conversations. We're building each other up, challenging each other, confronting our shadows, and doing breath work. And, I know that you've got a powerful men's group too. And I think that there's no end to the amount of these groups that we need in the
No.
world. And I will speak to this till the day that I die. There's nothing like men supporting other men. And I can feel that too. Like, you have to experience it to understand. And there's just absolutely nothing like it. I've also got a free men's group that's called the Heart Warriors. And we connect online once a month for free. We connect in person once a month here in Grand Prairie, Alberta. And that's all by donation. And there's guys that have started coming to that have been waiting for 2 years to even like come out of their house.
Yeah.
And they said how much it's changed their life just, being witnessed by other men. And I'm telling you, men, it doesn't matter what level you are on society's scale. Go out and join a men's group. It will change your life. I absolutely guarantee it.
Fully agree. Thanks for serving men so powerfully in so many different ways, man. Send me all those links. I'll make sure to put them in the show description. Thanks for being here, man. That was amazing.
Absolutely, brother. And thank you for being so real and raw. I really admire you, your content, and who you are as a person. So thank you for showing up as
Thanks,
you are
man.
as well.
Thanks. See you soon. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I honestly hope you found something you can use in your life. And I hope you found some relief in knowing that you're not the only one with challenges. We can be very isolated as men. If you don't have support in your life, please reach out to someone. It's okay to need help. It doesn't mean that you're less of a man. In fact, it takes a courageous man to know when it's time to ask for guidance. Until next time, brother.